Thank you all for joining our third session of the Virtual Entrepreneurship Toolkit series. We're excited to have you here. For some of you, maybe it's your first time joining us for the Toolkit series, but for those of you that have been with us so far for the first two sessions and now for the third, welcome back. My name's Cameron Law, and I'm the Executive Director of the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And I'm joined by one of our entrepreneurs in residence, Dr. Brian Gladden. We're excited to have him here. He helps head up our Toolkit series. So for those of you that don't know, the Carlson Center serves as a regional hub and platform for providing approachable and accessible entrepreneurial education, community, and support to enable startup founders of all backgrounds to explore and launch their businesses. Our mission at the Carlson Center is to make innovation and entrepreneurship pervasive throughout the greater Sacramento region. And we have this clear vision to really make this region a premier hub of regional innovation and entrepreneurship. And how we're going about doing that is we've really looked at the entrepreneurial journey as this continuum of support. And so we've developed three buckets of programs, the first being Discover, the second being our Build programs, and the last being our Launch. And this is one of our Build programs where we're providing you with the tools, the mindsets, and the frameworks to go about the ideation process and really finding testable ways to go about testing your business models and really developing those relationships with your customers and hopefully having a successful launch of your new idea and business concept. Tonight's session, which is our third session of 5, we're going to be tackling the competitive landscape, your existing alternatives, and your go-to-market strategies. It's a great session. We bring in Blue Ocean Strategy, which is not necessarily a new concept, but one that I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs haven't really come across, and one that's really valuable as you look at innovation as it pertains to value creation and bringing in non-customers into your market space. So before I pass it off to Brian, I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping. We would love if you just kind of remained on mute during the session. It allows kind of better for recording purposes for all of you that want to go back and record and watch the recording. We also will be using the chat feature to engage one another and also ask your questions. It's a great way to bring them in. I'll either select on you or just read your question out. So if you want to engage in that and just get a little practice by sharing who you are and why you're maybe back. And if you're not a repeat offender, then maybe just why you joined us here today would be great. And sharing maybe your LinkedIn information would be wonderful. And so without further ado, I'll pass it over to Brian, who is the exciting part of tonight and really providing you with the tools and frameworks to go about the business ideation process. So I will stop sharing and turn it back on over to you, Brian.
Thank you. You've set me up for failure. Now I got to be exciting. So hopefully I am amazing and exciting, and it's the best thing you've ever witnessed. If not, I'm Cameron, right?
Yes. There you go.
All right. Give me 2 seconds, everybody.
He's off to an exciting start.
It's riveting. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And we are here in week 3, some repeat offenders. Thank you guys for coming back. I didn't bore you, stiff last week, it looks like. So we're glad to have you back and some new faces. And we're looking forward to input from the last week, any questions you may have as we get going, or even the first week. So feel free to throw those in there and we'll answer those as we go. Or any key takeaways and insights, especially at the end. We'd definitely love to get your feedback on key insights from tonight's presentation, or maybe things that just didn't stick. I didn't talk about them well enough or get deep enough. So that will help us continue to evolve. Maybe, some more examples, or next time can you go through this deeper? That feedback's just as valuable as, best amazing presentation ever. So we like both. Competition, alternatives, and go-to-market strategies we're going to talk about tonight. And then as you can see, the next 2 weeks, next week is, the finance. So metrics, revenue, costs, not the most exciting, but definitely very valuable. And we'll have a guest speaker there next week who is definitely more of an expert in finance than I am, kind of talking about some of the simple ways to portray to investors what you're doing and what you project to do. And then the last week, really the best week, I think, because we have the panel of investors that you get to talk to in week 5, ask questions, real VCs, angels, other funding sources, whether it's SBA, banks, alternative sources, and do's and don'ts of pitching and what investors look for. So that's a really big week. Okay, so for some of you who've been with us for the last few weeks and even past sessions, you may have seen this, but others may say, oh, that looks different than the Lean Canvas. Well, it is. So this is the business model canvas. This is the original canvas where the Lean Canvas came from. And the business model canvas is used by most major business schools and large companies. It's an awesome tool, but it's usually for businesses already in business who want to then innovate their model. How do I continue to have new services offerings, explore while I'm exploiting, and make new models? So there's a few key things that have changed. There's 4 buckets or boxes that change with the Lean Canvas. As you probably can see, problems is over here for the partners, and then some solution versus activities, and unfair advantage versus relationships and metrics here. The rest is the same. Why I bring this up today is, especially in our pitch deck, there's a couple of boxes here that are very important that we want to add in, which is key partners and key relationships. So as you're talking to your investor in pitch deck, those are always slides you're going to see, whether you Google, pitch deck slides, Guy Kawasaki, whatever, those always come up, right? So we'll talk about those today. So what it really looks like is an augmented Lean Canvas with partners over here, customer relationships here, and we're still going to talk about these 3 things today as well. So when you guys think about competition, and gals, try and change that mindset to think about existing alternatives, not who is my competition. And this is a kind of a key mindset, kind of like love the problem, not the solution, because many times entrepreneurs think that there really is no competitor. I'm creating this new concept, this new space, nothing exists like it, new technology. That's great. But what's the alternative that exists? Every market in the world has an alternative. Every solution has an alternative. The question is there enough pain and problems with the current alternatives that people want to switch to your new solution, right? So if you think about an airplane, and you're like, well, what's it have to do with, the new way to fly I'm coming up with? Okay, well, that's transportation. What's the alternative? Using a car, using a train, using a bus, right? So what's the alternative to get the job done? If you were with us last week, that somebody wants that to happen, right? I want to get from point A to point B. How do I do it? I fly, I use a car, so forth. So when you're thinking about competition, think about alternatives. Just at a high level really quickly, because we're talking about business models, which is here in the middle, your Lean Canvas or business model, just some context of the things that are always affecting your business model, even from a startup. You have key trends, right? Societal, regulatory, technology. You have market forces, new segments, switching costs, revenue attractiveness. You have macro issues like COVID and war and things like that. Then you have industry forces, which we're talking about, competitors, incumbents, new entrants, which you are, most of you are entrepreneurs. You're trying to break in, disrupt, create something new, or substitute products, right? These are all potential alternatives to what you're doing. So when you're launching, most entrepreneurs seem to forget everything except their own existence, right? It's like, I'm creating this, I'm the best new thing out there. But once you enter that new market, even if you're creating your new blue ocean, your own new market, you'll have existing alternatives that you're taking business potentially from. How are they going to respond to you, right? Keep that in the back of your head as you launch, right? So Intel, if you're the next new chip maker, they're always scanning the market, what's coming out. So if you try and disrupt them, how are they going to respond, right? They're probably already have things in place to respond to new entrants. What could that look like? What are you going to do if somebody slashes prices, locks up materials, all these things that could shock what you're trying to do? So, and then what market forces will affect you, which is what we just looked at. COVID, right? Maybe if you were doing some brick and mortar thing, and what's going to happen if COVID or a pandemic hits. So think about these as you're launching from a macro business model perspective. And then what we're going to talk about now is really, who are your competitors? And this is another really big mindset shift from Lean Stack. People created Lean Canvas, so Ash Maurya. We call it the innovator's gift. Most of you here are innovators. You're entrepreneurs, right? You're innovating something. New problems worth solving can be discovered by studying how customers use old solutions. Think about everything in your home. Every solution that you have, product, service that you use or have bought, is there a pain that using that product or service could trigger you to switch to buy something new? And in what you're launching as an entrepreneur, you are finding space where you think somebody has a problem, some old solution is not meeting their needs well enough, and you have the best new, sliced bread machine ever created. So there is an alternative. The question is there enough pain or dissatisfaction with the old methods, old alternatives to buy your new thing, right? So if you think about it from old solutions give us, new problems to solve, then you can think about how you're solving those things and who those alternatives are. So let's look at some things. So existing alternatives. Direct competitors. That's a no-brainer, right? So most of you are probably looking, when you look at competition, who's in my market, who's a direct competitor? Many of you are probably saying, well, I don't really have any direct competitors. I'm creating this new space. Great. Well, you all have other competitors. You have indirect competitors or substitute products or adjacent markets, right? Ways to solve the problem that you're trying to get done now. So if you think about direct competitors, little infographic, simple. Domino's, Papa John's direct competitor. Well, Burger King is a competitor to Domino's. They're just an indirect competitor, right? Fast food market, solving a need to eat food quickly, but it's burgers versus pizza, right? So it's an indirect competitor. You also then have substitute products. So when you think about a substitute, we'll move out of the food market for a minute. One I love, because most of us are homeowners here, and especially in California, we get a lot of drought, right? So a lot of us have moved away from grass lawns to bark or cement front yards. So cement now is a substitute product for lawns. So before, you probably wouldn't equate cement and grass are competitors. Well, I'm building a pool, I'm building a patio, it has nothing to do with my front yard. Well, now it does. They're a direct competitor because you are now putting that as an alternative in place of that grass solution. So what are the things that someone is doing to solve that problem of putting in a front yard, right? Hardscape versus yard, green grass. An adjacent market, think about, if we're looking here at the food market industry, you are a caterer. Well, you are an adjacent market to a restaurant. You're not competing directly with them, but you're adjacent, right? You're delivering food. Maybe you're even getting supplies and food from a restaurant. You're then recooking it, repackaging it, delivering it as a caterer, who knows? But you're really an adjacent market to restaurants, right? You're still in the food industry. So, but that's an alternative to the restaurant industry for someone to get food. So as we look through the Lean Canvas, and what could that look like? Well, just pretend we're McDonald's. Here's our value prop. We're a fast food chain making burgers. If we look at alternatives, Burger King's a direct competitor. We have Domino's, which is an indirect competitor. You have catering, which is an adjacent market, but you also have a substitute product, which I'm a big fan of, right? Muscle milk. So if I want food now, a substitute would be a meal replacement drink. So when you're looking at what you're launching, what are those things that someone could do right now to solve the problem without buying your solution? So competing factors, we're going to get into an exercise now, which I love, and Cameron mentioned it, around a concept called blue ocean strategy. The more I talk to entrepreneurs, I'm pretty convinced that most entrepreneurs think they're creating new market space, right? Might not be a new market as we think about, Uber or SpaceX or Airbnb, but you're creating new space where you don't think there's competition, where you think there's a gap and unmet demand. And when we do that, we set ourselves apart, we differentiate our offering, right, by certain factors we're competing on. The question is, how can we visualize that? How can we validate and ensure that we're competing on the right factors, or even what those factors are versus just here's my product and it's technologically more advanced, right? So we're going to look at what are those key factors that customers evaluate you versus your competition on, which could be alternatives. How well do you compete on those factors? What factors need to be changed or created or added to add value, which is what most of you as entrepreneurs are probably creating new features or new elements to something that didn't exist. And how can you change your value curve to stand apart? This is, to me, one of the two most important business tools ever created. The Business Lean Canvas 1A and the Strategy Canvas 1B. In one picture, you can visualize who you compete against, how you can compete with them, and what are the factors that customers are evaluating you and your competition on. This is your value curve. So most of us have probably heard that term before. Every product, service, company's got a value curve, and we try and differentiate ourselves, but you've probably never visualized it. Visualization is a really powerful tool because it does a few things. One, it gets you and your team, your leadership team, your founding team, your stakeholders all on the same page of what do we really look like versus our opinion in our head. And two, how do we document the most important factors so we know where we actually want to focus? Not all of these factors are, and probably most of your mind, the same. Some of them you probably don't care about. So how do we reduce those and not focus on those, but really elevate the ones we think are most important and add new things to separate ourselves? This is just a fake example I created, but let's call it some sort of technology product. Everybody has price. And on the bottom down here, what we do is we list the competing factors that, from our opinion, we think customers are evaluating us on. So we try and get ourselves in the customer mindset from a customer point of view. And we list all those, and usually you have 7 to 9 major factors for your current market, just as it sits now. And this is not your wish list of what you want it to look like. This is real world what it looks like right now. And then on the left-hand side, what we do is we chart how well do we compete here, our offering value. Are we low? And low is literal. So if you're a low price, you put it low. If it's a high price, it's high. It's not the value, it's just literal. And we want to focus, let's say, on retail stores. We have more retail stores, so the number's higher. This one has a better SaaS offering, maybe from feedback, it's higher there. This one has more of a local presence, so you get the gist. You're trying to show how much focus, how well you do that versus your competition, and put that where you think is appropriate. You then do it the same thing for your 1 to 2 main competitors. Could be local, could be global. And then you draw the lines and you see what your value curve is versus your competitors. This is what we call a Me Too line. Most legacy products and markets, if you are objective and don't drink your own Kool-Aid, will probably look similar to this, where you have overlapping lines. Because obviously you're competing on the same factors maybe for a decade or 20 years. So you might be better at sales, and you've got a better local presence, and it's all about customer service. Okay, good for you. But maybe someone in a different city could care less, and so they're buying it because of product availability or ease of use or whatever, right? So they may be better in those areas. So after we do this, we're laying the foundation for how we compete now, who against, and then we can take the journey forward and saying, okay, with our new product potentially, what areas, once we validate with customer feedback, could we potentially lower or get rid of altogether that the market has historically competed on that we no longer think are valid? that we can get rid of the costs associated with those features and lower them or eliminate them, and then potentially raise other ones that we think are most important today in today's market, and then potentially add new features, whether it's technology you're working on or partnerships or whatever it may be, which will change your curve. So let's take a look at some real examples before we do this ourselves. So here is my interpretation of what an Uber strategy canvas would have looked like when they first launched. Everyone, like we said, has price. So let's pretend we are a taxi company first down here. Well, taxis are usually much higher than Uber or driving yourself. How do you do that? And so these don't have to be physical features of your product. They're just how the market either uses, consumes, buys, perceives your product, what you think are the most important elements you're competing on. Well, we hail a taxi, right? We're at the street corner, we're trying to wave a taxi down. That's how we get a taxi. So they compete, a taxi competes very high in that. That's what they do. Fee uncertainty. Well, taxis, you really don't know exactly what your fee is going to be, right? When you get in the car, you know the quarter-mile fee, but you don't know if it's going to take you longer to get there because of traffic and stoplights and detours. So there's not a set price. Waiting time, you might be on the street corner for 20-30 minutes. Car cleanliness in a taxi, that's awful, right? That's one of the biggest problems. It's dirty, it's smelly, it's old and ripped up, and you're not assured of standing on a street corner. So I'm in Rockland, many of you are in the Sac region. There is a really low probability if I stand on my street corner, I'm going to get a taxi in Rockland, right? If I'm downtown Sacramento, maybe. San Francisco, probably. So I'm not assured of a ride. So then I have a car and limo service is another one. Well, their price, sorry, this is taxi. Limo price is much, much higher, right? For a limo car service to pick me up. I don't have to hail a ride, so that's completely been eliminated. The fee uncertainty is much lower. If I'm going to rent a car or limo service, it's pretty standard. The waiting time, there's really no waiting time, right? I'm sorry, this is for instance, if I want a car limo right now, I usually probably have to plan a day, 2, 3 days, maybe a week in advance to get a car or limo service, right? If I called one right now, it probably is not going to be here in 15 minutes. Car cleanliness, that is very high. So they compete really well on that, but they do make me wait a long time. And the assurance of a ride is very high. So those are good things, but the price and the waiting time is not good. So Uber said, all right, how do we change these things? Our price is going to be lower. That's great. But we've eliminated this whole thing of hailing a cab. We don't do that anymore. We've eliminated fee uncertainty. So you know when you click the app what the fee is going to be from point A to point B. We've really reduced the waiting time. It's usually 15, 20 minutes, versus a taxi or a limo, which could be hour, could be days. They've really increased the car cleanliness, right? Maybe not as much as a limo service, but very, very high versus a taxi. They've almost assured that you're going to get a ride once you click on that button for Uber or Lyft. And then they added new features that never existed in the taxi service. Driver communication. I'm going to be able to text the driver. I'm going to be able to, call the driver. I'm going to have a review system, 4.9 stars for this driver. I'm going to be able to track him. He's coming around the corner now. He's going to be here in 2 seconds. And I can do mobile payment. Those didn't exist in the taxi industry previously when Uber launched. So you can see by focusing on certain factors, I can eliminate costs and I can really raise the key things that I think are most important to focus on for my new target market. Just not by happenstance. And again, as we talked about, you need to validate, are these the right factors, right, with your customer discovery. One more example. So Cirque du Soleil. Many of you on the Zoom here have probably gone to Cirque du Soleil. I still haven't gotten to go, but I want to go. So what we will look at here is what we call this grid: eliminate, reduce, raise, create. This is one of the tools in Blue Ocean, but we overlay this onto the canvas to kind of show us what I just talked about. What things did we reduce? What did we raise and create to change the curve? So when Cirque du Soleil started, who did they really compete with in their mind? They competed with other circuses, regional circuses or Ringling Brothers, right? It was kind of a circus theme. Their price is much higher. Circus tickets are much lower than a Cirque du Soleil ticket. That's okay. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. But what they did, they said, okay, what are the key attributes, factors of circus? Well, they have star performers. They have the ringleader. Let's get rid of that. We don't need that. They have animal shows, especially Ringling Brothers, right? Tigers and lions and elephants. The most costly piece of any circus is animals, feeding, care, transport, all of those things, right? Training. They got rid of all that cost. They said aisle concessions, right? Get your peanuts, popcorn, guy coming through selling you Cokes. They don't have that. Let's get rid of that. Multiple show venues, you have the clowns here, you got the animals here, you have the acrobats over here, right? And the different venues in a circus. They got rid of that. Fun and humor, they just reduced that. Yeah, you still have some of that, but that's the focus of a circus, not so much for Cirque du Soleil. Thrill and danger, yes, but not, again, you're not putting your head in the tiger's mouth. It's not quite the same thrill and danger. And they really wanted to raise the venue, right? It's more like going to a high-end play or a Philharmonic, a very nice venue, right? Versus a pup tent with literally metal bleachers that you're sitting in, right? So then they said, we need to create new factors, a theme. So every year there's a different theme, right? Zumanity or different themes for Cirque du Soleil. We're going to have a much refined viewing environment, which kind of leads to some of the things before about no concessions or better venue. Multiple productions, but to me, the big thing was art and dance, right? It's all about music and dance and art versus clowns and animals. Still has a circus feel, but it is a different type of circus. So they are purposefully changing their value curve to set themselves apart than their existing alternatives. I'll stop there and answer questions before we do the exercise, because this is, I think, a really important tool for entrepreneurs and startups to understand who's in their market. And you might have a much different curve than a Me Too, because you're starting from a blank screen, right? You are creating something new. But it's important to be able to document and visualize how your competitors that are alternatives compete and what those factors are.
Awesome. So we did get a couple questions in the chat box, Brian. So the first one was, how does this model apply to services like consulting?
Well, since I'm a consultant, that's a good question. So I've done my own Blue Ocean Strategy Canvas. So the question is, one, what services do you perform as a consultant, right? So there's a million types of consultants, pretty much any industry. So is it in a certain industry? You can have down here, right? Obviously, consulting services is just one thing. So what do? You can have things like, I only coach and consult. I actually don't do. Are you actually doing work? Are you managing and guiding? Are you educating? Who are your competitors? Do you consider yourself just a local consultant? And I'm just consulting in Sacramento, so I'm just comparing myself to a couple other consulting firms. Maybe you're doing financial consulting, to a CPA firm down the street or somebody else. Or are you looking at Ernst & Young and Deloitte and Accenture as consulting, Price Waterhouse? Those are the biggest, if we're talking financial consulting firms in the world, right? So when I look at this for myself, I put Accenture as one. So Accenture doesn't really do Blue Ocean Strategy and Lean Canvas and Business Model Canvas, but they do management consulting, right? So maybe the methodologies I teach are a unique factor. What I would put myself very high and them very low, but other things they teach, system integration, other types of consulting, financial, so forth, I don't do. So the question is, how do you view yourself as a consultant? What are those services you perform? And who do you see yourself competing against? And so you got to really define that.
Faten, you had you sent me some extra questions related to that around like training and management. I don't know if you wanted to ask a more direct question to Brian. If not, I'm happy to further facilitate it. But okay, looks like we answered it. So awesome there. And then Ray had kind of a question around the competing factors. I think we partly addressed it, that those are varying factors as I kind of mentioned per industry, those will shift based on those competing factors. So
yeah, and so again, this is your interpretation of what you think is the most important to the customers, right? And hopefully you can use real research from Gartner and Forrester and IDC. Every industry has reports, associations, what are people purchasing habits? What do they compete on, right? So can't just be your opinion. You got to try and validate that. But what I really recommend, the key thing is, I guarantee if you do this for your startup and you have the rest of your founding team do it, you will have very different answers. And then the question is, how do you create a single version of the truth for you as a founding team to have the same picture in your head of where you're going and what factors you're competing on? Because if your CTO thinks one thing and you're the CEO and you think something else and the finance guy has a third opinion, you're going in different directions and you're focusing on different things. You got to come together to figure out, what do we want to be? Who do we think we are right now? And what does the market look like?
So a follow-up question to that, David shares, how do you determine the key elements to put in the canvas, which, I think initially is kind of that customer development, right? So you have some sort of, assumptions in your head. And as you go through the customer development process, you start to identify what customers value the most in that product or service, right? So partly that's kind of where, when you're doing the value proposition canvas, there's going to be some gains in their pains that they're ultimately mapping, right? So as we look at this, a lot of these tools integrate with one another in terms of where you're picking and pulling that content. So that would be my first step, is kind of as you go through customer development and narrow down exactly the pains and gains of your customer profile, those will take the competing factors along the bottom. I don't know if you have anything to add, Brian.
Just that, I totally agree with what you said. So that's why these tools work so well together, because it's all about the customer, right? And their job to get done. And you might say, well, I have a new market. So the customer, I'm trying to figure out what their needs are. Well, then go back to the existing alternatives. What solutions exist that you think you are just creating a leap in value for? And you need to map out those existing alternatives so you can show somebody, here are the differences, right? Here are the specific factors that I'm adding or changing to compete better on. And what's cool then, we don't get into marketing, but this is what you're marketing yourself on. This is your brand, right? When you're saying to hiring a digital marketing firm, well, what is the message you're sending out there? What are those key things you're trying to tell the market of why you're different than Ringling Brothers if you're Cirque du Soleil? Okay, it's about art and music and the dance, and it's not about animals and everything else. So how are you going to message that to the market? And this helps you pinpoint those specific levers that you want to focus on.
So we got another question. Can you repeat where to find those database libraries to research things such as the customers and competitors? I can't remember what you said.
Well, I mean, I just threw out some analyst firms, right? So, yeah. I mean, if you're going to Google analyst firms, and they're not cheap, right? So big consulting firms, when you talk about Accentures and people in the world, there are then analyst firms. Those analyst firms, the big ones out in the world, are called IDC, Forrester, Gartner is probably the biggest one, and they create reports for every industry in the world and every main competitor that owns those industries. And then trends every year, what are coming out? What's, if you're talking about IoT, right, Internet of Things, what's the next big thing in IoT? And, for the use in farm, as an example, there is a report for everything. The question is, can you afford them? $3,000, $4,000, $5,000? Can you get free information, which is what you should be looking for, to cut and paste and cobble all this stuff together, which is what most startups do. So
if you are a Sac State student, faculty or staff, we do have databases that you're able to access. We ran a workshop with our business librarian, Ann Bradley. You can check on our website, and it talks about how you can access those databases and access those data sets as it pertains to customer data. So highly recommend doing that. I think to answer your question, that's where IBIS World and some of those databases come from. So I couldn't necessarily speak to the validity. I do think they're good research databases. I would lean on the best data at the end of the day is when you talk to customers and get that feedback and have that evidence that drives that forward. I'm not sure, Chris, about access for alumni. If you have questions about that, I can definitely explore that on campus with you for sure. Any other questions around the as-is Canvas Blue Ocean strategy as a concept? I know it's one that's a little bit different to think about, but one that I think is really unique. I think to add on to Fatin's question, as I kind of look at some of our services at the Carlson Center, some things that, I like to raise is like the community and different value creators outside of just necessarily the curriculum development, right? So there's all those types of different value streams that people are trying to get out of their engagements. And so having those conversations with customers is key. All right. Are we ready for the exercise, Brian?
I think we are. So we are going to do this together. Cameron's going to put us into rooms. We're going to create our own as-is Canvas. And we are going to look at Southwest Airlines. You've probably all flown on Southwest. So pretending we are Southwest when they first started, not now, a lot of changes obviously, but what do we think their Canvas would look like, who they were competing against, and what were those main factors that they thought were most important to compete on.
Awesome. And how long do you want, Brian?
Let's do 10 minutes.
All right, 10 minutes it is. So for those of you that will be going into an actual breakout room, you'll have something pop up on your screen and you'll join that room. If not, you'll be staying in the main room with me and we'll be doing the exercise for 10 minutes. So see you back then. All righty. Letting Brian go so I can share the screen. All righty. All right, how we doing? You can unmute yourselves now if you.
Pretty good.
All right, good to see you, Manvi.
Good to see you.
All right, so our exercise here, we are Southwest. We're starting out as a company. We're going to be building our as-is Canvas and looking at the entire, the other airline industry. Our first activity or first component of the overall exercise will be to decide on our competing factors. So we have, it looks like 7 competing factors we need to map out for the airline industry. So the first one's always price. So we always compete on price. That's every industry. But what's unique to the airline industry that as they were looking at, what were they trying to compete on?
The ticketing process.
Ticketing process, okay.
Price.
So price is always the initial given one. Yep, you got that one, Jimmy. So we got price right here. They were all competing on that. The ticketing process. Okay.
Frequency.
What else?
Seating.
So Jimmy and then Nick.
I think I said frequency.
Is that of flights or?
Yeah. How? Yeah, flights.
Okay. And then Nick, what'd you have?
I said seating and then the reservation process.
Okay, so I'm gonna go frequency. Can I do, I'm gonna go turnaround time. And then you said reservation process. Would that go kind of what, do you think ticketing reservation, is that the same or is that different in your?
Probably the same in my opinion.
Okay, so we'll just for,
And
to
then
add them all in there. And then what was the other one you had, Nick?
Seating.
Okay, and
the Southwest does it where you can sit where you want. You check in by group, so you don't need to reserve a seat ahead of time.
perfect.
And Comfort would be one for the other airlines.
Okay. And when you look at comfortability, what are you associating that with, Nancy?
Well, way back then, you actually had more amenities available to you on a regular airline than you did on Southwest. You had more elbow room, you had snacks, you had different things. And of course, nobody has any of that anymore. But, at the time, that was something.
You got it. Thank you. I was only, I knew where you were kind of going. That was part of one of our, to kind of like narrow it down of what that kind of comfortability looks like. Cause I think there's two, when I think of comfortability, I think of two different things. One, the amenities, but also one's kind of related to personnel. So I'll leave that at that.
I don't know if comfortability will be something that we should count. Like comfort or like cleanliness is what I meant.
Cleanliness.
Cleanliness and maybe how the crew manages like their staff.
Okay. Cleaning and let's see. Maybe like service. Okay. We got two more. I have one in particular that I know we will need to put in there.
Cameron,
Actually two. Go ahead,
it's
Alma.
Alma. Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. Would it be bags fly free? Because I know with any other airline, they're what, $30 for a
Yeah.
bag?
Yep. So the one of them is baggage.
How about safety?
So safety is a good one. I would hope they would all have high. That's a good one. That's not the one I'm looking for. There's one I'm going to be particularly looking for, and I'm partly because I don't necessarily have a key on me right now, but just from doing it a number of times, there's one that I'm focusing on. But that's a good one.
Quality customer services.
So we have cleaning and service. So I kind of have that in one. So we got that one.
Would it be accommodations?
Accommodations.
Check-in process.
So I have check-in, ticketing, reservation process.
Boarding process.
So that's we have seating right here, seating process.
Would it be the type of airplanes or aircraft?
No, so it has to do with the airport.
Its own terminal?
So that's close. So I'll give it to you for
Maybe
sake.
layovers?
Has its own hubs.
Exactly. Who said hubs?
Type
Hubs
of
is
planes they use.
Yeah.
hubs is the answer. So some have hubs and some are more destination to destination. So awesome. Good work. Thank
By
you.
hubs.
So sorry, say that again, Jimmy.
What do you mean by hubs?
So if you look at like Delta Airlines or some of these larger, I mean, when they were starting out, they have like actual hubs. So you fly into Chicago O'Hare, and then from there you can go to a lot of different places. Whereas when Southwest was starting out, it was much more destination to destination. So they didn't like fly into a big hub and then fly out from there. They had more short-term destinations. Because it took infrastructure to set up those hubs, and so it was much of a lower cost. Good question. So our next part of the exercise, now that we have our competing factors, we need to move these up based on where we see Southwest versus the other airlines. So that was just me showing you. I will move them up so you can, if you give me like a 1 out of 10 of where you thought Southwest fell in terms of their price to start.
That'd be a good
4 out of 10.
4 out of 10.
4 out of 10.
Do we disagree? Do we think they're higher or lower?
Is 10 higher or one?
10 is a high price.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
So it's a low to high offering. So it's not necessarily like, for some people it's like, yeah, I would love low cost, but it's more of, is it a low cost or a high cost?
Yeah. I would say like a 3.
Okay, so we got 3 and 4. We all agree?
Yeah, I think it's pretty low because they use the same planes to minimize their maintenance costs.
Perfect. And then what was kind of the average industry? Were they higher or lower, and by how much do you think?
Like 7.
So up here. We all agree with Chimmy?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, and then so in terms of the ticketing and reservation process, was the other airlines, did they have more to offer in terms of that experience where it was like, people and there was more of a process? Was that a high thing, or did they have a low offering for the other airline?
The other airline was a lot.
Was a lot more of a process. So we're saying up here. What about the? Go ahead, lower.
No, I think it would be a lot higher than that.
Okay.
Maybe like more 8 or 9. That's just my opinion.
I think they're kind of all the same, though.
Okay, so what about Southwest when it started? Did they have like self check-in, or a smaller process than other industries or other competitors?
I think they have a pretty easy check-in process. So I would give them like a 4.
Okay, so we'll go like right
And
here.
this is based off when they first came out, right?
Correct.
Oh, then I'd give them like 6.
Okay, so they're up here. All right, and then for turnaround time, where did the other airlines, were they quick turnarounds or not?
I would say
They
that
were longer
longer
turnaround.
turnaround.
Longer
Maybe
turnaround.
a 7. Yeah, like that's cool.
And then Southwest?
Probably a 5, 6.
Okay. And then the seating process, was there a big process for Southwest or a pretty streamlined process?
I think that's what made the turnaround so fast.
It was
They didn't have a
simpler.
process. Yeah, they didn't have a process.
Okay, so it was low. And then the industry competitors were, where would we put them?
Above.
Above them somewhere right there. All right. And then what about the offerings for snacks? And this was back when Southwest was founded. Did Southwest offer much food?
No.
No, they didn't. What about other airlines?
They were fairly gracious in the beginning, yes.
Okay. And then the cleaning and I guess maybe the service of the staff.
Well, in the beginning, I think they were still about the same.
They had high level of service or low level of service on like the planes.
Well, they didn't service their planes as well. That's true, but
This is where it all evens
But were
out.
they like friendly? Like were they more friendly than like other airlines?
yes.
All right. So this was higher than other airlines.
Yes.
And maybe we'll just do this as a service of staff friendly. That will be clear. And then baggage. So did they have a high baggage offering in terms of like free or no?
Was it free?
You didn't have to pay extra.
Yeah, they had free bags. And then others was low. And then the hubs.
They didn't have hubs.
They didn't have hubs, exactly. And then others had the hubs. Maybe not every one of them, but much more of the hubs. All right. So what we see, right, is they have some of the similar ones. Southwest was more of the budget offering. They decided was we really want to focus on service in these bags. And so we wanted kind of that destination to destination. And so they cut costs in these other areas, but created new value in those particular areas. And so it's a great, tool to be able to look at your kind of competitive landscape and where you fall against industry competitors. So I will close their room. Any questions on that exercise or thoughts in relation to the as is canvas? No questions, no thoughts?
That's a good process.
Yeah, I think it's a good visual representation to see. One, I think just as a team, when you go through that competing factors and understanding what you're actually competing on, it's really key to know that as a team. But then also, where do you see your roadmap of products and services? Are you trying to be the premier offering or the more budget offering? And then how are you creating new value for your customers? All right, there are 10 seconds from coming back, and then we'll keep on moving forward. But if there's no questions, we can wait for them to come on back. Did you not get done over there, Brian?
We didn't map it out. We had a great dialogue on factors, and then Ray made my night by saying that he thought I looked really young to not be able to remember who Southwest competed against, like TWA, and I think I shocked him with how old I am.
You did, yeah.
Good stuff. So were there any questions from your group, or were you good to go?
Go ahead and let's talk through it, because we did not get to. We just started talking about the car and some of these things. Let me share and change the display setting. All right. So you guys probably are overachievers, Ken Cameron's group, and you guys probably mapped it all out. So good for you guys. We were a little slower because of the moderator in our group. We didn't quite get there. But when we think about this, other airlines, right? So price, we forgot meals until the end. This was another big one that they looked at that not a lot of you probably thought about. When we think about how do we lower costs, what were the norms back in the day, right? In the 70s and 80s. All of you have probably been to some sort of, 1K gold VIP lounge, right? Those are really expensive for airlines to have within airports. So they said, we don't have any of those. There's none of those. So we're going to get rid of a lot of costs by getting rid of lounges. We're going to get rid of meals. There's no seat choices, which all of you probably got. And some people in our group, we talked about hub connectivity and number of places. Well, this actually, let me get my little annotation tool. Can't see what we're doing. That's a big one. Friendly service, yes. Speed to get from A to B, and then frequent departures. So this is what a car looks like, right? Think about, they were competing against regional drivers here to Disneyland, right? Fly with us instead of driving 8 hours. You don't get any meals when dad's driving to Disneyland. There's no lounges. There's no seat choices except front seat and back seat. There's no hubs. Probably not very friendly service. It's going to take you a long time to drive, but you can leave whenever you want, right? That's the big thing about a car. Frequent departure and a really low price. All it costs me is my gas. But the rest of it, it's not a good competing factor to drive. So they said, great, let's change this curve. Low price, not as much as a car. You get Coke and peanuts, right, and some pretzels. So there's, not really, I would even lower that, food, not a meal. There's no lounges. There's no seat choices. Hub connectivity, their goal is to not do that. So if you think about other airlines, you go through Dallas or Denver or Dulles, right? Or Atlanta or San Francisco or LA to get to other places. That's how most of the airlines back in the day flew into regions. So you would have to go through a hub to connect. They said, we want to get rid of that. There's no hub connectivity. You're going to go direct from, Phoenix to Vegas, Phoenix to Dallas, these type of things. There wasn't big hubs you had to go to. We want to really increase the friendly service, right? And that even within the uniform change, right? You had shorts, you had casual dockers versus every other airline. You got, suit and tie, people singing, right? Making jokes. So very different vibe on purpose. And then speed, how quickly can we get you from point A to point B? Not this, technically the speed of the airplane, but speed to your destination. A car takes a long time. Most other airlines had to go through hubs, or you're doing long distance flights. It wasn't the quick regional hour, 2-hour flights. So it took them longer because you have to go through a hub. And other airlines, again, you didn't have that many frequent departures. So Southwest said, we want to really increase that. Short hops, a lot of hops in the region. Let's lower the price. One type of airline, 737 planes, and no meals. All these things lowered their costs. So when you think about existing alternatives, right, that's the car. And many of you in your industry might say, well, I'm an airline. I'm competing against this guy and this guy. They're airlines. Well, you're also competing against existing alternatives. And what could that look like? Any questions there?
I don't see any in
All
the
right.
chat. Yeah, I think one of the things that I love that you speak to sometimes, Brian, is just looking at the non-customers currently, right? So looking at that car drive from here to Disneyland or from Sacramento to San Diego. Now, when you have an opportunity to take a Southwest airline flight, it's more affordable than a Delta Airlines one. And so it makes there actually be a decision between should we drive with the family or should we hop on Southwest. And so it potentially brings in new customers into that marketplace.
Yeah, Cameron, remind me to redo this slide. I mean, to like literally publish something, because I want to, I think there are two other ones here that they added to create the Blue Ocean, which was free luggage that our group talked about, as well as one type of plane, right, which lowered their costs. And I think the Blue Ocean Institute kind of missed that. So we will create that.
There we go.
All right, so let's move to go-to-market plan. So when we think about go-to-market plan, there are really about 4 different areas that we want to look at least as it pertains to your pitch deck, right? There's a ton of marketing tactics and things you can look at. We're not talking about marketing. We're talking about what's my go-to-market plan. Marketing are tactics and things you're going to do with social media, things like that, which is a channel. So we're not talking about that. But we're talking about how do you get, keep, and grow customers? What are the channels you're using? Who are your early adopters? What are my alternatives, which we just did? And then who are my partners? Who are those people that are helping really make my business model work, that I can create, deliver, and capture value, right? That's what a business model is. So in most of the slide decks that you look out there, and again, the Guy Kawasaki one's the most popular, you'll see all these slides in there, right? Channels and customer relationships, your customer segment, who is your early adopters, usually in there. Partners, right? How are you going to market, getting your stuff to channels? So you could do this in 1 slide, 4 slides, however you want to portray this, right? Depending on how detailed you get in your slide deck. But we really want to talk about early adopters, channels. Oops, I got them backwards here. Sorry. So early adopters, we're going to talk about this a lot. Really important people. Who are they? What are their characteristics? What are their behaviors? What are their roles? And what potentially are their titles, so we can try and identify these people. Partners, that could be very key to you as an entrepreneur starting up. And here as an example, I'm using trucking or logistics company as a partner, right? You don't have to buy your own trucks or planes. A payments company, right? Someone doing e-commerce. So who are those key people enabling your solution that your investors are going to want to know about, right? Okay, great, you made this new great app and you're selling something. How are you getting it from point A to point B? Who's doing the e-commerce, all that. Channels, are you going through distributors? Are you doing direct sales? Are you going to go through Amazon as a marketplace or eBay? And then customer relationships. Who are you targeting? Here, maybe it's nurses and doctors if I'm selling a healthcare product. Who are you trying to build relationships with? And how are you doing it? Is it a direct sale here, or is it, again, an OEM or a distributor? Those are all the key things that are much deeper foundational level than marketing tactics. You got to have how is all this working together when you're creating a new startup? So early adopters, we're going to talk about them first. Who are they? So hopefully the diffusion of innovation curve is not new to most of you. If you've seen this drawn, it's been drawn since 1962. So it is old, right? And it's never out of style because it still holds true today. We are looking at these people over here. You can lump in the innovators, but it's really these early adopters that we're looking for, this 16% of people. And many of you might be those people in certain industries, right? Whether it's tech or something else. And then you have your early majority that once they see it's working and there's value there, great, they're jumping on it. Then you have a late majority, people that, you know, going to wait a few years until it's really proven. And then you have your laggards, you know, those of us who still have a BlackBerry or a Palm, right? We're way down here. Those are the people that if you're the iPhone, you're not targeting those guys because they're 5 to 10 years down the road still. That's not who you're trying to sell to. So when we look at early adopters, why this is so important is because this is who, if you've been the first few weeks, this is who your MVP and your offers are designed for. Your minimum viable product is specifically designed to sell to early adopters. It's not designed to sell to the rest of the market. If it is, then you've over-engineered and it's not an MVP by definition. An MVP means you have a minimum number of features that will make somebody see value enough to buy your product. Only the minimum number of features in that product, which keeps your cost down. The people who see value in that are these people right here, which helps us get traction, right? And so we're going to look at some more of those models again. We've got to get traction to prove that these people have a problem and our thing is solving it. Once we understand that even better, then we start to add more features to our product that then hopefully the majority will like and start to get product market fit. But an MVP is not product market fit for those of you who maybe thought it was. That's just a early indication that you're on the right track, that you've got an MVP worth buying. But there's a problem that happens we're going to talk about later, which is crossing that chasm between an MVP and someone who is, you know, buying always the latest new thing, and that gap between the rest of the market, which is crossing the chasm, if you've heard of that before, which most people don't do. So these early adopters, why are they so key? They are the key to you being successful, period, as a startup. It's all about the early adopters. They're the people that have experienced a switching trigger. Something has triggered them to need and want a new solution, right? So we're going to look at some examples of this behavior, but think about something that maybe you think you're an early adopter at, or something just happened and you didn't have, either had a bad experience with some product or service, you use it and just didn't meet your needs, and you're now looking for a new way to solve that problem better. The current stuff just doesn't meet your needs. And either one of those, it could be COVID, right? COVID has created a lot of switching triggers. You know, think about Zoom and things that we're doing, right? Or food delivery, right? No one is eating in restaurants around here right now. So there are switching triggers that have caused someone to look for something new. And we can see this in this customer forces model. This is part of the Lean Stack and Lean Canvas group of tools. It talks about buyer behavior. So when you're validating what you think customers are doing now, this is a good visual way to understand their behaviors. We're pretending this is an early adopter, and you know, this is, we all have resistance to doing things new, right? New ways, because we get comfortable. We don't want something new when I've learned that I like what's going on. And so we're comfortable this in this old way. We have inertia, we're using it. That's going to continue to happen until some triggering event where our expectations get violated, right? So something has happened where now that's not good enough. I want a new solution. So this person, this early adopter, is now aware that they need something new. They're motivated to look for something new. They probably have a budget to look for something new. Your goal here is to promise them something new and better, right? This new offer you have, which is here. And when we go back to jobs to be done, you're helping them get this new desired outcome, this job to be done, to get it done, to meet their expectations in a better way. So this journey is what the customer forces model, we kind of think about when you do customer discovery. Literally, there are boxes almost like customer interviews where you can fill in notes. What was this person's triggering event? What was their expectation that was violated? It was too slow, or it didn't do this, right? What was that solution they used? What are they looking for now? What's the biggest pain that they're trying to overcome? That helps you validate what the biggest jobs are, with this kind of visual, put yourself in their shoes, right? But they need to tell you, what was this triggering event? If no one has a triggering event, then they're probably going to be comfortable in what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to offer them the same thing, but a lower price. Well, that's a red ocean. That is not, usually something that an entrepreneur is coming, maybe it's Costco or Walmart. Okay, great. We're going to offer you the same thing at a really low price. That's a different market, right? That's a different way of looking at something. And maybe that's what you're doing. That's fine. But was the price at the triggering event? Okay, this is too expensive. I want it lower, whatever it might be. When we look at the early adopters, and I mentioned most of these already, they have a problem. They're aware of it now. They're actively looking for a solution. They might have even assembled a solution out of parts, and they've got a budget because they want to fix this thing. Most of the rest of the market is not aware of the problem and is not looking for a solution, which means you have to do a whole lot of education and convincing them that they even have a problem. That's not who you're looking for. An early adopter is who you're looking for because they have the problem. The goal is to give them a solution, an MVP that meets their need. And then you start to get traction and revenue. And then you start to build on new features that actually add enough value to the rest of the market that they will buy it from you. And now there's proof that people use it and it works. The question is, again, who are these early adopters? What are their habits, their roles, their titles, characteristics? What are their behaviors? And when you find one, you need to ask them for referrals to another early adopter, right? Someone that's a friend that has the same problem. Because this is one of those really big, tough questions, is who is this early adopter that I'm trying to go get? So when you're doing customer discovery and interviews and you talk to 50 people, you might only have 10 that are actually early adopters, right? The rest of them could say, no, I don't, that's not a problem. I'm fine with the current solution. I don't really see value in what you're talking about. They're not an early adopter. They haven't had a triggering event. It's great to take down the information because they're going to be your early and late majority of the market. So those things will be important to them later, but you got to find the early adopter because that's who you're selling to now. They are buying your vision. They're not buying your product really, because your product's probably going to be kind of ugly, or service, on the MVP, it's going to be bare bones. They get that. They're buying your vision of what will be in the future, and that you understand their pain and their problem, and you're going to help them solve it. They're going to stick with you through good and bad because they share that vision. You need them to fall in love with the idea, not your product itself, which is why we talk about stop building your product, because it's going to look like crap anyway. So if you're trying to sell this ugly looking thing to someone, you're trying to sell the product versus the vision. In my head, I can envision a lot of cool things. And if you deliver me an MVP, I'm like, okay, well, that's good enough for now. But you are then sharing the rest of the roadmap with them. Okay, next year is going to have this feature, then this feature, and they're giving you feedback. And they're your champions who are going to can help you get those things to market. And when we look at the innovators, are really not the people you want. That's fine if you get them. They probably already created a solution just like you have. They don't really probably see a big value. It's the early adopters who they're interested. They really see the value you have is a must. I've got to have this. Talk about social endorsement. It's interesting here. they're neutral. Then you get to mass market, they have to have the social endorsement. Who's using it? What are the influencers? These people are suspicious about new products, right? That's why they're not going to buy your minimum viable product. They're afraid of risk and uncertainty on it. These guys are interested. Let's move to partnerships. So partners, we're going to talk about who are they, key partners, suppliers. Is it what type of a partner? A joint venture, a supplier, OEM relationship, brick and mortar store, retail, marketplace? What key resources are you getting from them? What things do they do for you? All those different alliances can be really key partnerships that you need to think about. So what are some reasons to partner? Well, you could get shared economics, economies of scale, obviously. If people are already doing something, think about a manufacturer, they are going to be able to purchase raw materials at a much lower cost than you. So maybe you have a supplier getting certain materials, making goods for you. You might have a partner that has money investing in you, as well as resources. Maybe they even have sales teams, logistics. So right, you're going to augment, maybe even outsource some of your things that you need to have done to them. Delivery to channels, access to customers. So if someone's already in the market, they have access to customers. That could be, they could be selling your product, right? Could be a distribution channel. They have access to marketing. Maybe they have a brand recognition that's going to get you traction. Or they have expertise. They know how to, make this thing that is a component or a key to your new startup, right? So if you're building, you've created an intellectual property and a patent, and you want to go sell something, but you don't want to have to stand up a manufacturing plant to make this thing. Well, then great. You just go get, call the textile manufacturer or an electronics manufacturer. You get them as a fab shop to make it for you, right? It's your IP, and then you're going to go sell it. So that reduces your risk, right? You don't have to do all these things, have the capital to build all these things, or the expertise. You're going to put the pieces together in your ecosystem to make it work. So channels. How does your product get from company to the customer? That's pretty simple, right? Physical as well as web mobile channels. Many of you might be creating something and selling it directly to the consumer. Good for you. Some of you might create something and it's going through a retailer, right? I mean, Best Buy. You created a laptop or a device, right? Who are you going to sell it through? Fry's, Best Buy, maybe, or even Amazon. Maybe you're selling through wholesalers. You don't have the channels to get into Best Buy. So you're going to sell it to a distributor like Ingram Micro or Arrow or some other high-tech distributor who sells all sorts of products. They have the channels to get into the retailer who sells it to the consumer. So where do you fit? Who are you selling to get your goods to market? You don't have to go direct. Many times nowadays people say, oh, just a website or my website or e-commerce or Amazon. Okay, great. That's fine, but not everything is sold, online. So that's why Best Buy and Fry's still exist. Costco, Walmart still exist. Healthcare, just retailers still exist. So how can I get these products locally? So here's some examples of different types of channels. In the middle is direct, right? I'm meeting you face to face. Well, now it's probably I'm meeting you virtually face to face versus in a coffee shop. But social media, that's a channel, especially if you're Facebook or Airbnb or Uber. Obviously through the internet, right? Whether it's an email or it's some sort of chat room or forum, a physical store, a kiosk. You go to the mall nowadays, right? Or the bank, you're doing things through kiosk, maybe even at a theme park, right? So there's connectivity, obviously, is a big key there. Game consoles. People are chatting and doing e-commerce through gaming consoles now, even streaming movies. Online catalogs. So there's a lot when we talk about omni-channel, which means, you know, all the ways you can get to somebody. How can you get your product or service to the end user? So customer relationships, this is a big one your investors are going to want to know about. How do you get, keep, and grow customers? So many of you are probably techies who are building something, probably an app, which is great, but you probably aren't really good at sales and biz dev and marketing. How are you going to get customer, keep them, and grow them? Are you outsourcing all of your customer service? You know, or you need to hire people? Who are you touching? So these are all the things that you need to think about, not just getting them the product, but keeping in touch with them. And it can be very easy, especially with now technology. It could, you know, types of relationships we'll look at here. Personal assistance, self-service, could be automated services. You know, think about personal, right? Okay, am I going to hire a sales rep to go out and sell this? And to go, you know, each week, if maybe you've been a sales rep, a pharmaceutical rep, right? You showing up to the doctor's office, you know, every week, here's some new samples. How's it going? What can I do for you, right? That's how you're keeping them, that physical touch service. Or it could be a self-service, right? A kiosk, a self-service. You go to the bank. Automated, you go to a website, call it DirecTV, and you got a problem. Maybe it's an AI chatbot. You're touching and keeping customers through customer service through a chatbot in that case. Maybe it's a community. Maybe it's online forum. You're on Facebook. You're on LinkedIn. We're messaging. We got forums that we're parts of. So those are communities. You know, co-creation, which is now YouTube and Amazon, where you're doing product reviews, blogging, talking about things. You're really creating that awareness and touching people for potentially the manufacturer. So all of these things support loyalty programs, marketing, are ways that you can keep in touch with your customers and even grow them, right? So let's look at an example, Airbnb. We're just going to look at the relationship piece here and channel piece for a second. So how did they keep in touch with customers? Well, it was through tailored emails to start with. Again, remember, we're talking about startups, which many of you probably are doing emails, and a community, right? They're trying to create this community of users once they have enough, just like Facebook, right? That network effect we talk about. What were the channels they were looking at? Well, referrals, you know, friends, start with, recommendations, and then the advertising. They were both doing some online and offline, trying to, you know, make people aware of Airbnb. Those were really the main ways that they were trying to get awareness out. And quickly, we'll look at early adopters. They were looking for people ready to share their residence and earn money as hosts. So you might say, well, what about the people looking, you know, for places to stay? Well, you got to have, on this type of marketplace, you have to have the supply before you can have the demand. If you start getting demand and there's nowhere to stay, you're probably going to shoot yourself in the foot right away. So at least there had to be some places to stay. And obviously they started looking at places in San Francisco, friends that they knew that had extra rooms. And so now, gee, we've got 5 rooms we can, you know, our buddies want to advertise. Great, let's put an ad out that we have 5 rooms, you know, for rent. But if you got 100 people and you have 1 place to stay, you're going to have bad reviews, bad customer service. You know, you don't want that out there. So depending on what you're doing, sometimes you have to have the supply side before you want to get the demand side. Let's look at Amazon. How are they getting to people? What's their channel? Well, affiliates, resellers. So, you know, remember, they started as an online book store, right? Amazon was not AWS when they first started. It was the biggest bookstore in the world online. They just so happened to have a whole bunch of extra server space that they then created Amazon Web Services so that we could store our stuff there. And then they did e-commerce, same kind of time frames. Self-service was how they were doing it, right? You go on and you order your stuff, buy your book back then. and also automated, which was, gee, you bought this last month, Ray. We think you'd like this book. So they were pushing information to you, right? Or you could say, tell me when something else is like that in my basket. Give me a signal. So they were looking at book readers and early adopters, customers searching for rare and special books, and internet users looking for book selling services. People, if I want to sell my rare book. That's how Amazon started. So when you think about really who my early adopter is now, they were ultra focused on what they were doing there. Once they got a foothold there, call that their early customer segment, they then looked at core capabilities. What do we have or capabilities where we could potentially offer to other industries? Oh, we have an e-commerce platform. We could do more than books. Oh, wow, we got all this internet space and server space. Do you think anybody would want to put their really sensitive data on our servers? Absolutely. So we are going to do an example, all of us together. We're going to do several of those elements of the Lean Canvas for Facebook when they first started. So we're going to look at the relationships, the channels, the early adopters, and the partners. Those 4 areas. So we're going to break into some rooms and do kind of what we did last time. We'll be scribes, and you guys kind of blurt things out, and we'll let you kind of practice at it.
So we had a couple of questions come in. Rebecca, did we answer your question related to how to connect with your early adopters? If not, we can speak to it further, but just wanted to see if we.
Yeah, I think the question that I was really asking was, how do you find those people? So Brian was talking about, if you have a service like for Airbnb, for instance, you need people willing to, open up their house and rent it essentially to a complete stranger. How do you connect with those people? Are there any suggestions, or is there a good process to find those people? Because I imagine they're kind of a niche group, or maybe they started out as being a niche group. So I was just looking for some thoughts on ways to, figure out who they are, if you will. Like maybe that falls under research techniques or something like that. But I was just wondering if there was a process for kind of looking at who those people might be.
Yeah, and I don't know if you missed part of it, but there's several pieces to that answer. The first was the traits, right? We talked about what are literally the roles and titles of potentially somebody that you're trying to sell to, right? So an early adopter, if you're selling to a specific industry, who do you think right now, if you're selling an HR service, you're probably not going to sell to the CEO or the CFO. You might be going to the HR department. I have the next best thing like Indeed. I've got this new, software application. It's going to cut your time in half. You're probably looking at the functional role, right? The HR director, right? Somebody in HR. What's the role? What's the title? What's their behavior? What do they do in that instance? So think about those type of people that you think are looking to solve that problem, because that's their role. If it's harder, like an Airbnb, then you usually start with somebody local to you, 1 degree of separation. And there's data out there on this. You can Google. It's like, if we're just doing mass marketing and anyone on the internet, it's hard to find that early adopter. But if you know someone with this triggering event and this pain, great, you talk to them, that's an early adopter. That referral to one of their friends with that problem, that's how you find those early adopters. You usually want to start local to you, right? Because it's easier to meet with people one-on-one. It's somebody they're going to talk to you. That's how a lot of people, Facebook, obviously, we'll talk about that. They started with people they knew locally, Airbnb, San Francisco, friends of friends who had places to rent, because you can get to those people. Their issues and triggering events and pains. You can then also go to places like forums. You go to Facebook and LinkedIn. So if I'm looking for a specific type of person, maybe I go to my LinkedIn and I go to a specific forum group, somebody who is in telecommunications. I'm probably going to find a lot of techie telecom nerds. I used to work for Verizon, so I'm going to go to the telecom group and say, hey, I have this great new solution probably. Here's the problem I think exists. Hey, do you guys have the same problem? You're going to get a lot of feedback from those engineers, those telecom gurus said, yeah, I got that same problem, or here's what I did to get around that problem. Now you're getting feedback. You're not trying to sell your stuff, but you're consuming all this information and validating, yep, the problem exists. Here's some existing alternatives. Here's some workarounds. Then you can pinpoint and go, hey, can I get a few minutes with you? Sounds like you have the same issue I think exists, and get more detailed feedback. That's an early adopter.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is I know Reddit is an area, another forum to look at. And then as you kind of look at that early adopter pyramid, right? Your early adopters are looking for a solution. And so sometimes it's just understanding the words and language that they're using and pretending like you're from an empathetic kind of lens, right? Is where would you start that search if you had that problem, right? And so maybe it's a search engine that takes you to a forum that now you see, okay, here's the community group for this particular issue, or it takes you to a magazine where they, have a bunch of subscribers, and you could subscribe and learn more about how they're currently solving that space, right? And so the more you know about the existing alternatives and the problem, kind of where to start in terms of where to look, if they're already kind of solving it in some fashion. So hopefully that kind of got you looking in the right fashion of where to start looking. There was another question from Monvi who shared how would you try and go about finding a key partner that's environmentally friendly, especially if you're trying to go about a sustainable development process. So some of that may be key partner development. I know that that's maybe not something that we do a huge deep dive in, but curious, Brian, if you have any thoughts of you probably had more experience in finding key partners with the medical business.
Yeah, half my time has been direct and indirect, creating channels and partnerships. And so, first you're going to most likely start regionally, right? Locally. Well, who are potential people that are doing something in that business that about, call it healthcare. Okay. So whether it's UC Davis, I know they're world-class in healthcare. Are there biotech people there? Can I go there and talk to them about, hey, I'm looking for some, small, businesses or startups or some people I can partner with that do X, Y, and Z. Is there anyone here? So starting with that local context of something, or you have a national association. Every industry, everything has an association. Who are these people that I could potentially get a hold of? And if someone's like, hey, I'd love to talk with you and partner, great. Okay, then talk to them. But start with the referral, start locally, and then branch out nationally with things like associations and groups. Hopefully you have a decent understanding of the industry you're creating this new thing for. So usually people have an idea of who the players are in the market. And if you care if they're local or not, maybe they're other side of the world and you don't care, but if you want someone local because it's easier to work with a manufacturer who's a partner, okay, good, then start locally and use your network of people to find people that are doing that thing, and that's the best way to go about getting a partner.
Awesome. All right, we got that. So we had one last question before the breakout. This was from Sunny, just kind of referring to early adopters and that they're buying your vision and not just your product. And kind of you mentioned to at some point kind of stop building your product and selling that vision. Would you kind of share more about what that means in terms of that early adopter?
Yeah, so I don't know if you were with us last week. So last week, I think even week one, we talked about the new entrepreneurial mindset and concept that LeanStack and many accelerators are putting forth, which is we're trying to actually get revenue and traction from early adopters before we actually build anything. We're trying to get a list of people saying, yes, I will buy that if you build it. Put me on your waiting list. Here's a deposit. Ship it to me. Here's my down payment. And that is the new way to show traction to investors, which is I'm not building a MVP and then hoping I can get someone to buy it. I'm getting traction and revenue before I even build one line of code or one piece of equipment. And that's the early adopters. They will buy your offer. And so when LeanStack last week, we talk about the Mafia offer. The offer comes from all of your insights in customer discovery, right? We're in learning, we're in customer discovery. We've got now enough learning and insights that we know the problem. We think we have a solution from all the feedback. We then go to the early adopter and say, you told me these are your problems. Here's my solution. Here's my offer to you, what it does and the price. Do you want to buy it? And if they say no, then obviously you haven't given them enough value, either the features, it's the problem, you're not hitting the problem correctly. You need to go back to the drawing board. But if they do and say, yeah, dude, that's awesome. When can you get it to me? Great, get them on your list of, letters of intent or a down payment. Now you have traction and proof to investors that you have something that's of worth. You have basically, you're building now an MVP and you already have a group of people willing to buy it. We showed the example of Tesla doing that. Tesla did not build the high-end sports car, I think it's the whatever S model, Roadster, and then go out and try and sell it. They bought an existing sports car, took all the engine and everything out, put batteries in it, put the Tesla logo on it, and said, if we can build this, will you buy it? And those rich people that said yes, they gave them $5,000 deposits. They got several hundred $5,000 deposits without building one thing. Because that's an offer. That's a Mafia offer. It's so good you can't refuse it because you're showing the vision. They didn't build the car. They showed the vision of what could be. It was a Lotus Esprit. It didn't even look as nice as a Lotus Esprit, but that's the vision. You're selling the vision to the early adopter of how you might be able to solve their problem. Now will you buy this? And that's what you're trying to get to.
Awesome. Yeah. I wonder if there's some, just as you described it more, I understood it better as well. I'm wondering if it's are buying the value proposition, right? So there's still something you're building in terms of the value proposition and doing that work, whether it be, setting up a landing page that's, clear and these are your problems. This is the, future solution that's kind of solving your needs. So maybe we can fiddle with that. I think it's a great question. So thank you for that, Sonny. So I think we're at time to start heading to a breakout room. How much time do you want?
Let's just do 5 minutes because we're actually not doing too bad. 5 minutes should be good.
Perfect. All right. I will open the breakout rooms and we'll have 5 minutes to tackle that.
Cool.
All right. For those of you that are still here, you're with me. All right. So we are going to be doing a parts of the Lean Canvas and one part of the business model canvas for Facebook. So we're going to be tackling the customer relationships, channels, early adopters, and then their key partners. So let's start off with who are the early adopters for Facebook?
Students.
Go ahead, Lily.
Students.
Students. Okay. Yep. Where are we? Here we go. Students. Were they K through 12 students, high school students?
College students, university
students at uni. Okay. All right. Students at uni. Was that the main early adopter? Okay. What channels did they use to reach those students?
College boards, they put up an ad.
College boards, yep, that's a good one.
Probably word of mouth.
So I'm gonna word of mouth, good one. What else might they use?
I was in college, I did a lot of flyering.
Okay, so flyering.
Just put flyers everywhere.
Yep, so it's kind of like the College Board's flyering. Got it. Perfect.
Online advertisements.
Online ads. Okay. I got one more that I'm thinking of. It's part of kind of clubs and things like that. That's what I was thinking about. They did I'll put it in here. Fraternities and sororities. And my spelling's not the greatest, so I apologize. All right, and so how did they maintain those relationships? What were the ways that they were maintaining those customer relationships with the students at uni through these channels?
Email and then in-app chat. Dick mentioned in the chat here.
In-app chat. Yep. Nice. There was there's one unique feature I think of, it's pretty famous for Facebook. It's kind of
Is
like
it incentives to hook up with people?
So yeah, it could be the recommendations. Is that what you're kind of thinking? Recommendations for
Pen pals?
Friends.
Thinking of the wall, the feed.
Yeah, so I was thinking, so wall and feed, I was thinking, and like the likes, right? So it's kind of that engagement aspect is like, oh, someone liked yours, but also you can like other people's and it keeps you, well, one
I
from
don't know if this would be something that we can count like free of cost, because it really didn't cost you to talk to someone across the world. So I don't know if that could be something that we would include.
So that would be more in one of the like value propositions or the solution. Okay. But yeah, no, good component. But yeah, I think, when I look at the across the globe, that's maybe that recommendations from friends, or recommendation for friends to connect across the globe if you have those. So we'll move to the last one since we have a minute left. Who are some of the key partners in, getting the value proposition of Facebook through these channels and whatnot? So who are some of those key partners?
Users.
So users. So users, I feel like is actually one of the customer segments.
Weren't friends key partners in the beginning?
Friends of the founders?
Yeah, and I guess they're social networks.
Telco company.
Telecom companies?
Yep.
Is that what you say? Telecom companies, yep.
Those who give ads.
Advertising companies?
Yes. Like companies.
I'm thinking of one in particular where all of these lived. Think about .edu.
Universities.
Yeah. So I think the universities were a huge key partner to start. That's not how you spell it. All right. Any other key partners before
Somebody put in the chat said MySpace and internet.
Gotcha. So those were some of the existing alternatives, right? MySpace, let's say existing alternatives. Nice. I remember switching over from MySpace.
Beta companies.
Beta companies and for like testing out the product.
Oh no, not yet. Maybe not yet at that point.
No worries. Awesome. I think that's a pretty good comprehensive list of the go-to-market on this side with who the key partners were and helping them kind of develop that. So it looks like they'll be on their way back here in 15 seconds. Any kind of questions on early adopters, channels, customer relationships, or key partners?
So for customer relationships, basically what we include is what made the customer relation valuable, like what kept it going.
Exactly. Yep. What kept that relationship coming back,
Okay.
and yeah, how you were kind of engaging them once they kind of had used the product or service.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. All right. Back to you, Brian. Brian, if you're talking, you're muted.
It was amazing. I had a great thing going there. You guys missed it. You guys really missed out there. Hopefully the breakouts were good. Hopefully you got some good, something good out of that as far as practice. So let's move on to next. So traction, which is the name of the game for a startup, which is really customers and revenue, right? Showing that you're making progress. So last week and the week before, we talked about customer problem fit, problem solution fit. So obviously we're escalating all these learnings, but now about product market fit and MVP. And when we look at the first 3 weeks, we talked about you got to get out of the building and talk to customers, right? You have to validate and do some customer discovery, which it really is. What's the problem? We talked about week 2, hypothesis, creating experiments to make sure that you have you've validated the problems, you've validated your solution might work. Now in week 3, we're pretending you already have problem solution fit. How do we get MVP now with past the offer stage and product market fit? So this testing and learning should never stop. Even once you have product market fit, then it's testing and learning about, okay, what's next? What's the new feature, right? To continue to stay ahead. So that's the hard part, is the continual testing and learning. You know, the build, measure, learn never stops, but most firms don't do it because it's hard. It's a lot of work. And so then you just start to rest on your laurels and say, oh, we've got revenue coming in. Let's just keep making this thing and we're good. And pretty soon you're a blockbuster and you're out of business. So never stop innovating and testing and learning. Most of you, if you have an MVP, some of you probably do, and you've probably already got some customers and you're already to market, you're here. The MVP is in the early adopter stage. You've got a few customers, you've got a little bit of revenue each month. Now you're trying to scale up. You're probably doing a lot of marketing. You're trying to get this big to buy your stuff. So if you've heard of Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm, this is huge. To get from MVP and these people buying your stuff to get to the major part of the market buying your stuff is a big leap. The problem is most of you are not going to be able to do it and be successful. And that's because you're not continuing to evolve the MVP to meet the needs of these people. So if what you're getting traction on in revenue now is truly an MVP or close to it, that's great. That just means you're on the right track of the problem solution. But these people, as much as you want to do marketing and social media and everything else, they have no desire to buy the MVP. They don't see enough value in the MVP to solve their needs. Remember, the MVP is the minimum viable product, and only these people with your passion and vision care about it. But even after a while, they're going to stop caring because you've promised them a roadmap. You've promised them something else that they are buying into, right? Like, I'll buy this now because it helps me, but I know you're making something bigger. You've got to continue to refine the product to get to product market fit. At MVP stage, you are not at product market fit. You're at problem solution fit and you're making some revenue, but you're not at product market fit. To get to product market fit, you have to do the other things first, right? You don't just say, oh, I built this thing, let's do marketing, we're going to get product market fit. You got to go through here and here. You've got to do the steps: validation, discovery, problem solution fit, the offer, the MVP, and then you got to continue to ask then the rest of the market from those interviews and validating what do they need, right? And also from your champions who are your early adopters, what's the next thing? What's on that roadmap you have to continue to build? Once you get that part of the market, the early majority buying it, that's when you know you have product market fit. So most people don't understand that MVP is not product market fit. And they end up getting stuck in this chasm saying, well, some people started buying it. We just need to do better at marketing. Our salespeople suck. We got to do more social media. It ain't going to matter because you do not have product market fit. You have to evolve the product to fit the needs of this part of the market. There's not enough value in what you've created for them to give you money. So this goes back to one of the questions a minute ago. We started in week 1 talking in 2 about experimentation, right? We're doing discovery work of the problem built around the whole lean startup: build, measure, learn. Let's keep reiterating, keep asking questions. Then we get to this stage, which we just talked about, which was, I know enough about your problems now, Mr. Early Adopter, that I'm going to give you an offer. I haven't built anything, probably, maybe a landing page like Cameron says, or maybe you have a brochure like, okay, whoop-de-doo. Here's my price. Here's what I'm going to create for you to solve your problem. Do you want it? Yes, I want it. That's the offer, called the Mafia offer. Then once you have that, then once you get buy-in, then you go build the MVP to all that buy-in that people said, yes, that solves my problem. That's the smallest solution, creating and delivering and capturing money, value from your customers. Once you do that, then we got to get to that product market state fit. And the only way to do that is, again, to continue to ask your early adopters, create that roadmap, find out once the rest of the market starts to see that there is traction and early adopters are using something, it works, it's reputable, solves a problem, you need to make sure that their problems are the same as theirs. And if not, then you've got to continue to innovate and put those new features to get product market fit to the rest of the group here. We talked about this many times, minimum feature set for early adopters. And really it's a tactic to reduce engineering code. Most of you are probably doing a technology play of something, right? So most of you are probably out building it and writing code, and you're just continuing to write more and more code and to get a better and better MVP, potentially, or product. But stop doing that and start asking your early adopters what they want first, and then build to that and get that right so you don't waste time and money. And you want to get that product, that thing, in the hands of those early adopters so they can give you feedback and to, you know, this needs to be done better, because they're champions for you. They're going to tell you that, you know, this button's, you know, should be on the left side, not the right side, and this thing is not, doesn't work the way it should. They know there's going to be bugs, so you got to use them to fix it so that when you get to product market fit, those things are already worked out. So some benefits of the MVP versus a full product, you know, you're going to get to know your users better because the feedback, you're really focusing on your core hypothesis. These people have this problem. Saves you time and money. Otherwise, you're going to go broke trying to build stuff and keep asking people, does this solve your problem? There is no perfect business plan. So if you spend 6 months writing 300 pages, instead of actually asking potential early adopters, customers what they want, you're going to waste money. And this is a good one. So you asked about how do we know if they're early adopters? As Cameron said, if they don't know they have the problem and you're trying to educate them on the problem, they're not an early adopter. They're going to know they have the problem. You know, so if I'm saying, that's not a big deal to me, I'm not an early adopter. If there's someone who's saying, yeah, that's cool, but if you added this, this, and this, I would buy it, they're a late majority, early majority customer. that's great. We want to take note of all those features, but you as an entrepreneur, your goal is not to build everything everyone wants. That perfect product doesn't exist. And if you did that, you'd go broke and it would take you a year to get to market. Those are nice to have in the future products. So if someone's telling you that, oh yeah, I need this, this, and this, and they're not really understanding the initial problem, then they're a late majority, right? They're the rest of the market. Note that, move on. They're not early adopters. So what we've been doing is talking about mindset, ideation, giving you guys information on frameworks, tools, helping you create your pitch deck, getting you from idea to early traction, helping you understand that now you get to problem solution fit, you have an offer that you can get out to those people. And if they like the offer, then you build the MVP. And this is where you start, bootstrapping, right? Getting it out there, making a little bit of revenue. Then we try and get to product market fit once we get from MVP. So this is the hard part right here. Well, I'd say the hard part is getting that first revenue, getting the offer, people giving you money for it. But then you still have a lot of work here to get this big curve, right? All the hockey stick we all want. So don't stop learning, don't stop validating and continuing to evolve it. We are right on time for some questions, I think, Cameron.
I don't see any in the chat yet, but happy for people, if there's any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask Brian and I any questions that are on your mind related to the last topic or any earlier as well. I'll give you. In the meantime, while you're thinking of questions, I just threw some links in the chat. So as part of our wrap up, while you're still thinking of questions, I threw a resource in there called Mentor Sacramento. We'd love for you to hop on. It's a free platform for you to connect to mentors, or if you're interested in mentoring, you can be a mentor. But it's a free resource that the city of Sacramento has invested in. There's also tomorrow a Clean Start Toolkit. So if you're looking at starting a clean tech business, our partners at Clean Start will be running a workshop at 6 p.m. tomorrow night. We also will be running a 4-part series with the College of Continuing Education called the Social Innovation Series that will be launching on March 5th. Brian and Jesse will be leading that. So if you're a social innovator or entrepreneur, we'd love for you to sign up for that program. Next Thursday, we have Grants for Startups. That'll be run by an entrepreneur in the Sacramento community called who runs Open Grants. His name's Sadel Trabovsky. We also have an Ask Me Anything with Rashawn Davis, who's an entrepreneur made at Sac State. The others are just some standing resources that we'd love for you to plug in. So feel free to plug into any of those. And we got a question. So my gap in time did the job. So how much time does it usually take to work with early adopters before moving on to the market, which would be, your early majority, late majority?
There's not a right answer that I know of. Definitely depends on your industry and what you're doing. But if you're doing what, in theory, the lean sprint, the innovation sprints, continuous innovation kind of calls for, then it should just be a few months, because that means you're continuing to do 2-week sprints, no matter if you got to MVP or not. Great, I got to MVP. Let's do another 2-week sprint to go talk to now what we think are the rest of the big market. What are their needs? What do we have to, what problems do we need to validate they're solving? Now we validated that, great, let's go out back and get a roadmap to build that, once you've done that. So you should always be doing those innovation sprints, lean sprints, and getting validation testing, and then building. And so that shouldn't take you more than a few months if you're doing it every week, but most people will, kind of slack off and only do that sporadically. So it just depends on how often you are getting out and doing your 2-week lean sprints. Honestly, there's a little bit better answer. I'm sorry, more pointed. I have another chart somewhere, and I'll pull it up next week because I can't know what it is now. there's a timeline down here. So just at a high level context, it usually takes 2 years to get to product market fit. So when we look at the lean stack, to get from here just to get something out the door, right, could be 6 months minimum. Then the rest of that just to get a year to get some, maybe some paying customers, MVP. That from MVP to that product market fit, that usually takes you another year, right? You're really trying to get that traction built up and refine the product. That's an entire year usually. But to get MVP to, start that curve, hopefully it's a few months, you're getting more and more customers, you keep learning. And we call this 10x scaling, which means I'm having a slower runway to start. So if I get one every year though, I'm gonna do 10 times what I did the year before. So it sounds like, well, that's daunting. Well, it's easier when you're a startup because now I only have to get one customer here. By the end of year one, I only need 10 customers. Well, that's not too bad. Okay, from year 1 to year 2, that's 100 customers. All right, well, from year 2 to 3, that's now 1,000 customers. So that's where the hockey stick starts to go. We talk about 10x scaling. If you said, well, my projections have me, at like 2x scaling, well, that's really tough. That means in month 1, you have a customer. Month 2, you have 2 customers, then 4, then 8, right? Your line goes like this, a straight line, which is almost impossible because it takes you forever as a startup to get going. And then once you do, that's where you really start to scale up. And that takes you about 2 years to get to here.
So with that, there was one other question, probably the last one we have time for this evening. What's a key indicator that it's time to move from the early adopters to early majority? So, and it might not, and so it's not necessarily, from my lens that you like, okay, now I'm shifting. It's more so of once you, there's kind of this saying around the product market fit, like, it when you have it. So it's kind of like now you know that there's a fit between your product and the marketplace. And that's where you start to look at how do you continue to invest in those channels to grow that from there. I know that's a very squishy answer, but that's kind of what the saying is when you have it, when you've kind of hit that product market fit.
I'll throw some details into that. We actually looked at this last week, the customer factory blueprint and the metrics that next week we'll look at some of these metrics. So I actually talking to a company right now with the same problem. That's the chasm. And you get to MVP and then you're like, okay, why isn't anyone else buying this product? And maybe you get 500 people to come to your website, but you only get 2 people to buy something. So you are attracting people, acquisition, but your value prop is not enough for the rest of that market to see value in buying it. So now you've got this, where is the bottleneck? The bottleneck's not in getting people to the website. Maybe it's right then when they see the website, they're not seeing enough value in your product, right? Or they download the app, but they don't ever use the app because they're just not seeing enough value. So you have to understand, okay, why is this customer, go back to that customer, not buying? Why are they not using? And now you've got to get more discovery from that majority of the market. They're not seeing enough value in what you've created still, or how you're messaging it. And that's that customer factory really helps with that, because it's who's the acquisition, the activation of what you're doing, the revenue giving you money, the referral, the retention. Those are the metrics to look at. Now with technology, it's easy. How many people went through my Google Analytics? I only had 2 people buy, but 1,000 people went to the site. Okay, so it's you got a big issue there somewhere. There's a disconnect in what you're selling to these people. And that is the best way to look at it, is those metrics to get traction.
Yeah, I think we discussed our metrics, the Pirate metrics. I think that's week 5. Or is it next week?
Next week is Pirate metrics.
All right, so we will be covering that next week. Also, we will be tackling cost structures, revenue streams, and then financial projections. So we have a guest speaker, Roger Godfrey from the California Bank of Commerce. I'm excited to have him come and share a little bit about financial projections and startup budgets. So we look forward to seeing you then. We'll be following up with the recording, the PDF presentation, as well as a worksheet, and we'd love to see you obviously next week and continuing to push your ideas forward. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and we will see you next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.